Welcome to the Time for Nutrition podcast with myself, Noel Thomas. On today's podcast, we talk to Paul Orridge, who has over 20 years experience within the fitness industry. He has performed a variety of roles, including personal training, lecturing, and technical writing, and is now a freelance subject matter expert and technical author. Today, we are talking about the myths and misconceptions in fitness. We are talking specifically around fat loss. So, what does the science say? What is the cause of the current obesity epidemic? Is it down to our hormones, genetics, or the environment?
It's a mixture of lots of things, but fundamentally, without doubt, it's an energy imbalance. Basically, we are eating more energy, more calories than we're burning off. The latest position stand from the American College of Sports Medicine and the World Health Organization are that we are consuming more high-calorie snacks and foods, and we're moving less. And that combination is what's causing us to gain weight. So for every 3,500 calories that you eat that you don't burn off, you gain a pound of fat. It's as simple as that. Now, lots of things influence this. For example, hormones. A lot of people talk about hormones. About 1 in 1,000 cases of obesity is caused by a hormonal problem. But if you have an underproduction of the hormone, thyroid hormone, that can drop your metabolic rate by half. So if you normally burn 2,000 calories at rest, you'll only burn 1,000. So now you're going to gain weight more easily. There's also a condition called Cushing syndrome, where you produce too much cortisol, and then your muscle tends to waste on your arms and legs, and you get a fat abdomen. But two hormones which have got a lot of press recently are leptin and ghrelin. And leptin is a satiety, it's a satiety hormone, and it tells us when we're full up. And it's the fat cells release it to say you've eaten enough. And what's quite interesting is that a precursor to obesity is that you have low leptin levels, so your body's you don't know you're full up. Yeah. But some obese people have higher than normal levels of leptin, but the body's not sensitive to it. Okay. Another one is ghrelin. And ghrelin is the hunger hormone, and this tells us when we need to eat. So our stomach releases this. So if we get an imbalance in these hormones, and this is common amongst some people, that they don't know when they're full up and they keep feeling hungry. Mm-hmm. So their need for their energy needs are not represented by their appetite. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you think, due to how the change of people's diets at the moment, whether they were becoming vegans, do you think that's going to change how things are in the future in regards to the obesity epidemic? Or
well, it's still going up at the moment, and the statistics are frightening. Depends what proportion, but you could still. I mean, my own mother was vegetarian, but she was well overweight. So just being a vegetarian doesn't stop you being overweight, because she ate her body weight in cheese and crisps. So just being a vegetarian isn't going to protect you from that. It's hard to say, but obviously there'll become a point where not everybody's going to be obese or overweight, because that just won't happen. And there was some talk in America that maybe it's leveling off now, but the diet has certainly changed. And the worrying thing is that in the last 8 years, approximately, there's been something like a 37% increase in takeaways. Wow. Now, physical activity levels have dropped, and there is some statistics. If you look at the series of articles which support this online, we give you the exact statistics there, but I think it's something like 30% of the population don't do 30 minutes a week of activity. And that's not going to the gym. I mean, walking, taking the bin out, walking to the shops. So when you combine very low levels of physical activity with increased calorie intake, you're going to get put on weight.
Wow.
You know, and even the slimmest person. Another thing that comes up is genetics. People talk about their genes. And what's really interesting is, yes, there's a genetic component to everything. Genes can affect our taste for certain foods. It can affect our attitudes towards physical activity. But a couple of genes, there's one called FTO. And if you have the FTO gene, if you have one copy of it, you've got a 30% increase of being obese. If you have 2 copies, you have a 70% increased chance of being obese. But that's 16% of European people have that gene. So you have to be careful. You may have a genetic predisposition to put on weight, but your lifestyle will determine how much weight you put on.
Of course.
So, for example, some people have a genetic predisposition for skin cancer. But if they don't go out in the sun or whatever, perhaps they're not likely necessarily to get it. So we have to be careful that our genes are not our destiny. In fact, there's an interesting study came out a few years ago, and they found that people who had a particular gene had a 23% higher risk of being obese than those who did not. But the people who had that gene who exercised had a 30% less chance of being obese than the people who didn't exercise. The thing you have to remember is that people will be listening to this on a media device. The average Briton spends 8 hours and 41 minutes a day on media devices now. So when you consider that, and that 27% of all car journeys are under 1 mile. So if you consider how we've taken away all of our physical activity, you don't even have to tap your PIN number in there, you just swipe your card. So a friend of mine's a doctor in nutrition, and we calculate if you got rid of powered steering in your car and remote control, that's 0.5 stone of fat in a year.
No way.
No, so if you start to look at those little things, you don't suddenly get huge overnight. And your body's very good at balancing calories. So for example, if you ate Christmas dinner, the average calorie intake on Christmas Day is 7,500 calories. So it's like 2 pounds of fat pretty much. But you're not 2 pounds fatter on Boxing Day because your body's able to stimulate metabolism and basically get rid of those. But if you do that chronically over a long time, that's when you're going to have a problem. So genes do certainly make a point. What is interesting though is, we're not too sure why this, if you have a overweight toddler, an obese toddler, but both their parents are slim, the chances are that toddler will not become obese.
Yeah. Okay.
But research done on a child of around 10, even if they've got a normal weight, if they've got 1 or 2 obese parents, the chances of them being obese is like 2-3 times more. So your family does have an influence, but is it their lifestyle or is it the genetics? There was a family that were tested and they were all very overweight, and the scientists tested them and their genetic profile suggested they should be slim. But the doctor who was part of the study, they checked her genetic profile and she should be overweight, but she was slim because of her lifestyle.
Yeah.
So your lifestyle really dictates. And a good way to think, your genes will predict who's likely to put on weight.
Yeah.
But your lifestyle will dictate how much weight you put on.
Perfect.
So some people just have to work harder to stay slim. We know that. But it's like anything. Some people have to work harder to put on muscle, whatever. But genes play an influence, but you mustn't be, they're not going to dictate what you're going to be like. Really.
Perfect.
So other causes, we've got well, as I say, psychological factors. Now we do live in a stressful environment. Everyone's stressed. And the problem with stress is it makes you make bad choices. So when someone's stressed, no one says, oh, I really need salad. Oh, I really need a raw carrot. That's really going to sort me out. What they'll go for is things like chocolate and crisps. Yeah, absolutely. It's sugar, fat, and salt is what you look for. So crisps, chocolate, all those things.
All like emotional food.
Exactly. Well, emotional eating, we'll come to that. It's actually a condition, they call it emotional eating or comfort eating. And what that's related to are levels of depression and anxiety. And a lot of people nowadays, depression is at a very high rate, anxiety.
Yeah.
And so people will turn to food as a source of comfort. And this can start really young. You have to be very careful. If a child hurts themselves and the parent gives them sweets or chocolates to make them feel better, this sets up, absolutely, it conditions them. So they start to think, oh, they associate being loved with food.
Yeah.
So when they become an adult, if they're upset, they turn to food because subconsciously they want to recreate that feeling of being loved. So psychological factors are a big part. Another one, which we tend to forget about, is sleep. Research shows us that if you sleep for less than 7 hours a night, you're more likely to be obese than someone who sleeps for 9 hours or more.
What's the average? 8 hours a night, right?
We should aim for that, but there's lots of studies going on now showing that we're just not sleeping enough because of these damn media devices again. Yeah. People sit in bed, they sit on their tablets and their phones, they've got blue light, which stimulates your brain, keeps you awake. So people are chronically sleep deprived, and this can cause weight gain. And also it can cause depression, which can cause weight gain.
Yeah.
So they think, they're not sure, but the science seems to suggest people that are chronically sleep deprived have a disruption in that leptin and ghrelin balance of those hormones, so they tend to eat more. And if you're tired, what you tend to do is eat more to try and give you energy. And you don't want to exercise. But we all know that exercise, if you're knackered and you go out and have a run or go to the gym, you actually feel better for it.
Get more energy.
Yeah, absolutely. So they are the reasons. So there's lots of factors, psychological factors. Environment, we do live in the perfect environment for putting on weight. It's sedentary, it's stressful, with easy access to high calorie food. That is like, the worst combination for putting on weight. Because it's just, there's easy access.
Yeah,
and
there's
you're stressed when
takeaways
you
on
go,
every
yeah,
corner. And
absolutely, 37% increase in 8 years. I mean, you don't even have to go out the house now. You get on your phone and you can order whatever food you want.
and not even have to move.
And you don't even have to move. And you don't even have to go to the effort of putting the numbers into your card. You just swipe your card. And so, yeah, all those things, people forget that every little bit of movement is burning calories.
Yeah.
And so we're just reducing it more and more and more, which is ridiculous. So overall, just to sum up on that one, without doubt, we're in a state of positive energy imbalance or energy balance. So we're eating more than we burn off.
Of course.
And that's a problem. But lots of factors influence that. So it gives us a clue, though, how we need to lose weight. We need to reverse that. It's as simple as that. You eat less than you burn off, you're going to lose weight. The law of thermodynamics state that, and it has to work. So, you know. So yeah, I mean, that was, so that's why we're basically gaining weight. We're eating too much and not moving enough.
In any discussion on weight, fat loss, someone is bound to mention the term metabolism. But what does it mean and how does it affect our levels of body fat?
All right, metabolism. Well, biochemically speaking, it's the sum of all processes in the body, anabolic and catabolic. That means building things up and breaking things down. But that's not really what people are referring to. What they're generally referring to is their resting metabolism. And that is the amount of energy we burn when we're not doing anything. There's lots of different terms used to describe this. We can talk about basal metabolic rate, resting metabolic rate, resting daily energy expenditure. And they're all slightly differently assessed in a lab. You know, I have done them in a lab. So slightly different, but basically it's the amount of energy you burn at rest. And this is very important for most people. 50 to 75% of all the calories that they'll burn in a day are from their resting metabolism. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a very interesting, easy way. We can work it out in a lab. We can go and record oxygen uptake and things, but you can, if you're a man, if you times your body weight in kilos by 24.2, and if you're a woman, you times it by 22, that gives you an estimate of your resting metabolic rate. So I actually measured mine in the lab. So I need 2,500 calories a day to lay on a bed and do nothing at all, just to breathe. 2,500. So you can imagine the bigger you are, the more muscle you carry, the bigger surface area you are. These things all affect your resting metabolism. So the more you can burn at rest, the more lean you're likely to be. Mm-hmm. So if you get a 300-pound bodybuilder, they're going to have a massive resting metabolism. Yeah. So they're going to need to consume thousands of calories just to maintain their bodies. Now, if you get someone who hasn't got much muscle, they've gained lots of fat, muscles atrophied, then their metabolism is going to go down. So they're not going to burn so much at rest.
Yeah.
Like we said about earlier on about thyroid hormone, thyroxine, if you have a low level of that, it can reduce your metabolic rate by half. So if you're normally used to burning 2,000 calories, you're suddenly burning 1,000. So it's very important. And so 50 to 75% of all the calories you're going to burn in a day are burnt just to maintain your resting metabolism, just to keep your body working. So what we want to do in order to make you a lean, mean, calorie burning machine is to increase your metabolism. We can do that by increasing your muscle mass.
Okay.
And so every pound of muscle you have, you need 8 to 10 calories a day to support it. Then you think, well, that's not much. But you imagine if you've got 100 pound of muscle, suddenly you're looking at 800 to 1,000 calories a day just to support that. Mm-hmm. So if we can increase your, say, muscle, we can increase your metabolic rate. And so the bigger people tend to be leaner. In fact, there's in some science to show that people who eat most are the leanest, because some of the people who eat the most tend to be athletes and things. They tend to be big people, so they burn more calories. But there is a misconception that fat people have slower metabolisms. Okay. If you think about it, if you're 300 pounds, you're going to have quite a lot of muscle to move that. So they can have, if they carry a lot of muscle, they can still have a high metabolism, but obviously not enough to offset their what they're eating. So yeah, it is very important. And so you can calculate it quite easily for a man, 24.2 by your body weight in kilos. That'll give you some idea.
And how about age in regards? How does that affect metabolism?
Good question. One of the problems with age is that as we get older, certainly if we lose muscle, and basically over the age of 40, really, you start to lose a considerable amount, and that will slow your metabolic rate. So we encourage everyone to do resistance training just for health and maintaining a lean body. So yeah, age will affect it. And it drops quite considerably if you lose the muscle. So remember, every pound of muscle is 8 to 10 calories a day to support it. Other things that affect it, gender. Women tend to have, a man and a woman of the same size a woman would have a slower metabolism because she has less muscle. It's not an inherent gender difference, it's just because they tend to have less muscle. So that would be on that one. Also, things like stress is an effect. So, the weird thing with stress is because it stimulates, if you get a release of adrenaline, it will stimulate your metabolism. There's some people when they're stressed, as we said earlier, tend to eat more. So it depends how it's going to affect you. With age, you're going to lose, it's going to drop by 2 to 5% per decade after the age of about 40, your resting metabolism. Other things that can affect it, things like caffeine. So what we call drug-induced thermogenesis, that can stimulate your metabolism. Cold environments. If you've seen Rocky IV, he's training in the snow. Is it Rocky IV? I think it is. Is it Rocky? This is Rocky IV. He fights Dolph Lundgren. Well, just being in a cold environment can triple your metabolic rate. Shivering can triple it. So if I need 2,500 calories to survive in a temperate climate, if I was shivering, I might need 6,000 or 7,000 calories a day.
Okay. So
it can triple your metabolic rate. So funny enough though, people in warmer climates tend to have slightly higher metabolic rates than people, for example, in this country, but very cold environments will make you shiver and that will triple your metabolic rate.
So would an ice bath do the same?
Well, it's interesting. I haven't read the research, but it depends how long you're in there for, really. So, but you're going to burn more calories because your body wants to keep warm. And because we are very inefficient. Humans are very inefficient. At best, we're 26% efficient, which means of all the food you consume, 74% of that gets given off as heat. 74%. And that's at best. And if you do things like resistance training and sprinting, it goes down to 10% efficiency. So 90% of the energy gets wasted as heat. Now that sounds like a bad thing, but it's not, because if we didn't, we'd all be as big as houses, if you think about it. So at the moment, we've got this huge obesity problem based on a poor efficiency. So if we were really efficient, we'd be in a right mess. So one of the problems we have, they say, is we kind of got these ancient genes in a modern world. So it's not really working out for us. So you need to be aware of that. Just trying to think if there's anything else. Now, the main things will affect it. But as I say, the most important thing here is how it affects your body composition is if you can get your metabolic rate to be higher, you're going to burn more energy at rest. And that's why in recent years we've talked about metabolic training, which we'll come to. And that's the point of there's no scientific agreed definition of the term metabolic training, but it stimulates your metabolism. So some high intensity metabolic resistance training can elevate your metabolic rate for 36 hours afterwards. So when you finish the workout, and on the articles online, we give you details of these, so you can go and look them up. For 36 hours afterwards, your body is nibbling away at its fat stores.
Wow.
There's a thing which you'll see a lot of nowadays mentioned called EPOC, or afterburn. It's called excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. So basically, it's how much you stimulate your metabolism after the exercise. And as a goal, for every 100 you burn in a workout, you probably burn 10 to 15 in the recovery. So if you can stoke your metabolism in the workouts, then when you're resting, you're still going to be burning more calories. So that's the important thing about knowing about metabolism. Yeah, definitely. The interesting thing is with fatter people, they tend to move less. On average, if you film them, it sounds like I'm having a go at I'm not. They tend to move less. On average in a day, they will move less. There's more effort, basically. So it's true. So so that's really with metabolism. It is very important. 50 to 75% of your calories a day will be expended at rest. So you need to get that to burn. You need to be a calorie burning machine.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's the basics of it.
So we're told that too much body fat is bad, and on the other hand, too little is considered unhealthy. So how much should we have, and does it matter where on the body we carry our fat?
Well, yes, good question again. Definitely, there's no straightforward answer for the first part because there is no universally agreed amount of body fat. The ACSM, the American College of Sports Medicine, who give us very good guidelines every 5 years, they say for a man for health, approximately 18 to 22% body fat, and for a woman, somewhere 20 to 32%. So for a man, for about 8 to 20% for a man, about 20 to 32% for a woman. For good health, because we know that if you have too much fat, that's related to many conditions like diabetes, heart disease, but also if you don't have enough, that can be problematic as well. So it's that range but it depends on the sport you do. If you're a sumo wrestler, you're going to need a bit of body fat. Whereas if you're a distance runner, Mo Farah can't really afford to eat too many pork scratchings. because suddenly it's going to be way too much. So it very much depends on if you have any particular sporting activities, but also in terms of health. It is very important that we get the right amount, but there is a gender difference as well. People don't realise. So we have two areas of body fat. We have storage fat, which is in the cavities in your body and under the skin, is what we see. And we have essential fat, which is kind of in the heart and different organs and in the bone. And that's essential for good, healthy body function. We don't have time here to go into all basically what fat does, but it's very important. Now, women need 4 times the storage fat of a man. 4 times the essential fat of a man.
Yeah.
When it comes to storage fat, a young male would about 12%, be about 15% for a woman. But in terms of this essential fat, women need 4 times as much, which brings their overall level of body fat up.
Yeah.
Now, the problems if women get too lean is it can cause menstrual irregularities, it can cause problems with bone density, etc. There used to be a figure that for a woman, if she had body fat less than something like 17%, then menstrual function would really be interfered with. But more recent research has shown some female athletes have a lot lower body fat and still they can function okay.
So they have the regular periods.
Yeah, that's right. I think there was a certain level that you needed in order for periods to start, and there was a certain level of body fat for them to continue in a healthy period. But some women can function with the lower levels of body fat and have no problem, but others can't. So it's really much individual. But women generally need more body fat than a man, and that's for basically to function as a woman. So there is no absolutely universally agreed.
Yeah.
What is a good measure though for health-related fitness is what the NHS and lots of people are turning towards now is a waist measurement, and your waist should be half of your height. And your waist is measured. If you go online and look at the article, I explain how we do this. But basically, your waist should be half of your height. So if you are 6 foot tall, you should be no more than 3 foot around the waist, to keep it simple. So half your height. So you're trying to work it out now, aren't you? So it is important though, because it brings us on to the second part of the question. It is very important where you carry your fat. If you have a large backside, that's not a health condition problem. It's called gynoid obesity. I'm allowed to say backside, or would you prefer bum? So if you have, you'll carry your body fat on your thighs and your backside. We call that gynoid obesity, and it's not really a health issue. But if you carry it on your abdomen, then you have deep fat. Yeah. And so it's going to be, and when I was a student, we looked at some MRI scans of obese people, and we cut a beer belly in half of the MRI scan, and it was like a big yellow ball of fat. And we looked at bingo wings, and it was just fat hanging off of the arm. Wow. So carrying your fat internally is certainly worse for you, and if it's on the abdomen, and we call that android obesity. So if you're an apple shape, it's more dangerous than if you're a pear shape. Yeah. The problem with another gender difference here, most women will tend to gain weight on their backsides and their thighs up until the menopause. Once they go through the menopause, their weight tends to shift to their stomach. That's more dangerous here. Now, men tend to gain fat on their stomach throughout their life. And why it's more dangerous, it's more easily broken down, taken into the bloodstream where it's implicated and in the development of heart disease and things. So, if you're going to have a large backside, that's not a health problem, but a large belly is not so good.
There you go.
So that definitely does make a difference, but where it comes off of is a different issue. I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit later on. We're going to talk about spot reduction, but you cannot just exercise a part of your body to get it to
hope for the best.
You go for the best. It's interesting. Actually, I don't know if it's worth editing, but there's some racial difference things which you might be worth mentioning. Yeah. Can we do that? Let's mention it. So, Jeff, okay. Cool. Interestingly, it's different for different races. If you are Caucasian, white, and you're overweight, it's not good for your health, but we can afford to have more body fat than someone who's Asian or black, because being overweight, if you're Asian or black, seems to have more serious consequences for your health. So they're currently developing a lower BMI for Asian and black people, because perhaps living in the colder northern hemisphere, we need more body fat than people coming from a warmer climate. So maybe their bodies, we're not too sure what it is, but definitely, so you have to be aware that there are racial differences as well as gender differences. So the BMIs are being adjusted for different races, and I think it's important. So say if you're from African background, African-Caribbean, Asian, particularly subcontinent Asian, then you have to be more aware of your levels of body fat because you're more likely to develop diabetes.
Yeah.
And that's very common in those sort of communities. So yeah, there are racial differences as well. Interesting enough, black people tend to store less on their abdomen than white people. So there are racial differences there. I'm not too sure again why that is, but generally black people will tend to store less fat on the abdomen than white people do. So yeah, there are those racial differences. There are other racial differences in our physiology. For example, a black woman is much less likely to get osteoporosis, much less likely than a white woman, but more likely to have diabetes. So yeah, and with modern medicine and science, we're acknowledging these differences. And so we might say to someone, if I was a trainer still and I had a black client, I'd be more concerned maybe if you're a little bit more overweight, it has a more of a negative effect on your health. So yeah, so there are some differences there.
There's an understandable tendency to want to lose as much body fat as we can, as quickly as we can. But is there an ideal rate of fat loss?
Absolutely. Yeah, people want to do things overnight. They want a magic bullet. When I was a trainer, a very large woman came into the gym and she said to me, I'm off on my holiday in 6 weeks and I want to lose all this. And I simply said to her, did you gain it all in 6 weeks? She said, no, it's been a lifetime. Well, you're not going to turn it around in 6 weeks. So there are some good science-based guidelines. Basically, regardless of how much weight you ultimately want to lose, you should only want to aim to lose initially 5 to 15% of your body weight. So let's keep the maths easy. If you weigh 100 kilos, you're looking at your initial goal is 5 to 15 kilos. An average of 10% is a good way to look at it. The reason for this is we know that if we set goals greater than that, they tend to fail.
Unrealistic.
Absolutely, they're unrealistic. So we look at that. Now, the rate that we lose it, the ASSM in their latest guidelines tell us we should look at a rate of about losing about 3 to 10% of your body weight over 3 to 6 months. Okay. Now, what we would look at is losing approximately £1 a week. Some guidelines say a kilo a week, but the quicker you lose it, you're more likely to take muscle with it. Now, generally, on a calorie-controlled diet, for every £4 of weight you lose, £1 is going to be muscle. Now, we know that we need the muscle to keep our metabolism, burning calories. So what the research shows is if we have a calorie deficit of 500 calories a day, and if we diet off 300, and if we exercise off 200, and that's not much. A packet of crisps is about 300 calories, isn't it? It's not much. And 200 calories isn't much. I mean, if you are a 100 kilo person, if you run 2 kilometers, you'll burn 200 calories. Yeah. It's that simple. So if you have that deficit a day, 500 calories, in a week, that's 3,500 calories. That is £1 of fat, essentially. Now, a study done on, I think it was army recruits, they pushed the calorie deficit up to like 1,000 and they realized they started to lose more muscle. So what we think is the break point is 500 to 700 calories a day seems to be ideal to maintain muscle. If we do any more of that, the body tends to panic. And remember that muscle is metabolically costly. It's 8 to 10 calories a day for £1. Fat is about 2 calories a day to support it. So our body will think, well, if I'm not using this muscle, I'm going to jettison it.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So really, 500 calorie a day deficit, 3,500 calories a week, £1 is spot on. Now, when you go on a calorie-controlled diet, it's not until the 4th week that you're burning about 80 or 90% fat. The first week, it's about 80% water.
Yeah.
So when you consider that, so if you think to yourself, okay, if I could lose £1, or some people even say only 80% of £1 a week, then you're doing well. So if you have a realistic goal to start with, that's what you want to work to. So even if, the only time this is different, if you are suffering some severe health problems and it's medically directed, then you can go on an extreme diet. But that has to be supported by a healthcare professional. For the general person that's listening to this and the general person that wants to lose weight, you're looking at a goal of approximately 10%. And that's your initial goal. And then you can readjust that as you go along.
Yeah.
But looking at £1 to £2 a week, I would say I would be happy with my clients £1 a week because you know it's more likely to be
achievable.
Fat.
Right?
Yeah, and it's more likely to be fat. Yeah. So that's the sort of rate that you want to be losing at. Yeah. Different. We're going to talk about it a little bit later on something else. But if you want to lose weight rather than fat, if you're a jockey, for example, or a fighter, or you do other than a weight-dependent sport, you often want to lose weight, not just fat. So, for example, in terms of exercise, research in Greece actually found, found that if you did a lot of long duration work, they tended to lose more muscle and they lost the body fat because they weren't really using that muscle.
Yeah.
So if you were, say, or a fighter get ready for a fight, you might jettison excess water. Now, we wouldn't recommend this for normal weight loss because you're not getting rid of fat, but you're trying to make weight. Do you see the difference?
Yeah, specifically.
So if you're a fighter and you've got to weigh in like welterweight or something, you've got to make that specific weight. So they'll use, which we'll talk about later, and different ways of doing this. So they're trying to lose weight. So we need to separate weight from fat.
Loss, yeah.
Yeah. So with the fat loss, about 10% of your initial body weight, and look at losing 3 to 10% over 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
So that works out, you know.
I think that gets mixed up quite often where you go, there's certain, whether it's like Weight Watchers or Slimming World, where women say, oh, I lost 5 pounds in the very first week, and they get super excited. But in all honesty, we all know that potential will be water, right?
Yeah,
Majority
absolutely.
Anyway.
Especially if you have low carbohydrate diet. With carbohydrate, it's stored wet. So for every gram of carbs you store about 2.7 grams of water. So if you suddenly deplete your body of carbohydrate, your body says, well, I don't need this water. So it flushes it. So, I've lost all this weight, but then suddenly that tends to slow down. And we'll talk a little bit later about high protein, low carb diets and things. But basically, we're trying to lose fat. So we want to make sure not to get hung up so much more on the figures, but think, okay, this is steadily, it's going at about a pound, half a pound a week, then we're pretty sure that's going to be fat. Because as I say, we really cannot overemphasize the importance of muscle, because that's what's going to keep us lean. In fact, interestingly, one of the concerns with women is they go, a lot of women, not all women, of course, they say, I'm scared of putting on muscle, I don't want to get too bulky. But the interesting thing is, because muscle is more dense, it has less volume in relation to its mass, so it's small. So a pound of fat looks bigger than a pound of muscle. So I've had clients who've lost fat, gained muscle, but look smaller because the muscle takes up less space, if you think about it, because it's more dense. So that's an important thing. So if you're a trainer, you have clients and they're worried about it. And also, I never call it resistance training with women clients. If they feel I have a problem with that, just call it body shaping, because that's essentially what you're doing. But it cannot emphasize again how much we need to stimulate that muscle. I think I've emphasized that quite a lot.
We often hear figures quoted such as fat loss is 70% diet, but what has the biggest influence on the reduction of our body fat levels? Diet or exercise?
Right, excellent question. Interestingly, people do ask this a lot, and there is a figure, and I don't think it's got any science behind it. People say it's 70% diet, 30% nutrition. And that often gets quoted, and I don't think there's any science. The most recent research shows that whether you create a calorie deficit through more activity or by eating less, you'll get the same weight loss. So if, for example, we reduced our calorie intake by 3,500 calories, so by the end of the week, we should be a pound lighter, hopefully. Or if we increased our output by 3,500 calories and kept our input the same, we would get the same result. So, but, now this is the interesting point, is for most people, it is very difficult to do enough physical activity alone to create required energy deficit, which is why organizations like the American College of Sports Medicine recommend that you aim for like a 200 or 300 calorie reduction in your intake and a 200 or 300 calorie increase in output. And that way, you're going to create that energy balance. And it's not too difficult to do because you're only, like I say, reducing your calories by a few hundred, 200 or 300, and you're not having to do masses of physical activity initially. So that's a good way of doing it. So for most people, it's a mixture. It's impossible to say. For some people, it might be 70-30. Others, it could be 80-20. And in fact, if you're working with very large people and very unfit, maybe it's even 90-10 to start with. But as they get fitter, they're going to be able to burn more calories. Yeah, absolutely.
Recently, there's been something of a backlash against traditional cardio for fat loss, with metabolic resistance training and HIIT being touted as being superior. Is that true, or should we stop doing cardio?
Yeah, it's interesting. There has been a big backlash against cardio. I was giving a lecture in London, and someone told me that cardio makes you fat. And I thought this was an interesting point. So I asked him what his rationale was for this, because it seems counterintuitive to say cardio makes you fat. He said, if you watch the London Marathon, there are a lot of overweight people in the marathon. But if you watch bodybuilders and sprinters, they're lean and muscular. So his thought that doing all the training for a marathon is going to make you fatter, whereas sprinting and resistance training is going to get you leaner. Now this, superficially, you think, well, maybe he's got a point. Do you see what I mean? You think maybe he's got a point, but we're not comparing like with like. For example, elite marathon runners, males, have body fat down at 3.5%. I mean, our healthy load average is about 5 or 6, but some are down in one study at 3.3% to be precise. And elite sprinters. Remember also, the marathon runners he's talking about are amateur runners. If you look at the elite runners, they're down at 3%. Sprinters, somewhere 6 to 12% on average. So that argument doesn't stack up. Cardio has its place. The ACSM recommend that the majority of our training for fat loss is some form of cardio, but it can be intervals, which we'll talk about in a little bit later. The great thing about cardio is it's a quick way of expending a lot of calories. So for example, to keep the maths easy, you will burn 1 calorie per kilo per kilometre if you run. So let's say, keep the maths easy, if a 100 kilo person runs 10 kilometres, there is 1,000 calories done. If they do three 10K runs in a week and a 5K, there's 3,500 calories just done in their running. I'm not advocating that everyone runs, I'm just using that as an example. The other good thing about the cardio is it tends to attack the deep visceral fat inside, which is the dangerous place to carry it, more than resistance training will tend to do. But there is a place for both those. So, and also you have to remember, if someone is overweight and deconditioned and has health problems such as type 2 diabetes, which has many associated conditions with it, they're not going to be able to do high intensity interval training. So it's horses for courses. So I would say you need as a trainer, you need all the tools in your box. And if someone comes to me and they're deconditioned and overweight, I'm going to start them on low intensity, long duration, because it's safer and it's easiest for them to cope with. But as they get fitter, I would introduce more high intensity activity because that will help them to expend more calories quickly. So there's definitely still a place for cardio. There is a place for metabolic training, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Resistance training as well. So, a good rounded program has all 3 of those in there. So yes, cardio, but it doesn't have to be long, slow distance. You can do intervals, you can do fartlek. There are many different techniques that you can use. So it doesn't have to be just plodding along. So, but it still needs to be in there for most people.
You say that traditional cardio, resistance training, and HIIT can all play part in a comprehensive fat loss training program. But how would you construct a fat loss program using these different techniques?
Okay, well, interestingly, it's pretty straightforward, actually. Using, again, the American College of Sports Medicine, we cite them a lot because they're considered to be the gold standard. So they do a lot of research in this area. So they would say, regarding cardio, you need to do something 5+ days a week if you have significant weight to lose. Resistance training, you need to do approximately 2 to 3 times a week. With the resistance training, we'll look at that a bit first. It's very important you do the right type of resistance training. So it's looking basically to increase muscle mass. So we're looking at doing compound exercises. We're working at 8 to 12 repetitions for 2 to 4 sets. We're having relatively short recoveries, a minute or so. And the reason for this is if you only have about a minute recovery and you've worked in the 8 to 12 rep range to failure, then that stimulates the release of testosterone and growth hormone, which help to increase muscle and to get us leaner. So it's very important. So again, on the site, we give some details on this, how the guidelines for developing a program. With the cardio, the harder and longer you can work, the more calories you'll burn. It's a dose-response relationship. So the more you do, the more you're going to burn. So to start with, they say 20 to 30 minutes, and you build that up. Now, the secret, without getting injured, to building up training is the level of overload. So with a client, if you can start, if you're trying to lose weight yourself, you can start with a 20-minute walk, great. If you do that 3-4 times in a week, the following week, you increase that to 22 minutes, not half an hour. And the following week, 24, because your body can cope with a 10% overload. There's lots of good science for this. And if you trained 500 hours one year and you're an athlete, next year you can only train 550. You wouldn't train 1,000 hours. So if we use this as a good rule of thumb, and it works with fat loss programs, if you can start on half an hour next week, 33 minutes. So all 3, we also need obviously to put in some flexibility, but definitely resistance training a couple of times a week. And there are details of the kind of program, and the cardio, approximately 5 times a week or more if you have to. I mean, the ACSM's current guidelines are 200 to 300 minutes of activity a week. But if you think about it, if you get off the tube or a bus a few stops early and you have a 20-minute walk at home. So you can accrue this throughout the week. It doesn't all have to be in a gym. Exactly. And the smallest time sort of slot would be about 10 minutes, the research tells us. But I would say any calorie is a good calorie if you're going to expend it. But I would say, 10-minute blocks. So throughout the day, you might have 5-10-minute little walks. It's all going to add up. So don't be put off by thinking, if I can't do 60 to 90 minutes a day, it's a waste of time. It's not about that. But that's optimal. And if you've been very overweight and you need to keep the weight off, the guidelines are something like 60 to 90 minutes of activity a day, which is very difficult for some people. One of the problems, I explain, if you have been very overweight and you lose weight, you might have seen the slimmer of the year loses a stack of weight, and the year later, the backs are all bigger than they were before. Now, this is interesting. It's to do with an enzyme predominantly called lipoprotein lipase. That's the rate limiting enzyme for storing fat, basically. And if you get to about 160% of your ideal body weight, I think it's 160%, or something like 70% body fat, your fat cells split and you grow new ones. Because most of the time, your existing fat cells just fill up with the excess fat. But they get to a point, we call it the hypertrophic limit, where they can't grow any bigger. So it's like carrier bags, in the shopping, and you put it on, you try and get as much as you can in that 5p bag, and in the end you have to buy another one. So this is what happens with your body fat. It fills up a cell as much as it can, and it can't get any more in there, so it splits and creates another one. And they don't go away, and they want to be fed. And this lipoprotein lipase wants to store more fat in those. And so if you have been very overweight, it's not like giving up smoking. You've always got to be aware of your weight because your body wants to regain that weight. So that's an important point to notice with that. So if you've been overweight, you'll need to do more activity, not just the cardio, but more activity. And they say something like 60, 90 minutes to prevent weight regain. So it's very difficult. The fat cells will stay there, and unless you have them liposuctioned out, they'll stay there and they want to be fed. And so it's much more difficult. So one of the things is try not to put on lots of weight initially. But you do have to, I can only reinforce, you have to get a huge amount of fat in order for the fat cells to fill up and split.
Is it true you can only reduce the fat cells?
Yeah, you can't get rid of them.
You can't get rid of them.
Absolutely. You will atrophy them as you use because basically when you're exercising and diet, you've created an energy deficit and your body says, well, I need more energy. So where am I going to take this energy from? I'm going to take it from your fat stores.
Yeah.
And that's how it works. So so you can shrink them down, but you're not going to get rid of them.
Yeah.
But you have got to, I think it's something like 70% body fat and about 160% of your ideal weight. You've got to be very, very big. I'm kind of what we would call grade 3 obesity. That used to be called morbid obesity, but it's what we call grade 3 obesity. So you've got to be very, very big for that to happen. But it can happen. So be aware of that. When people blame their genes for gaining body weight, and if you look at the current problem that we have with fat, our genes, don't quote me, it's something like 100,000 years to change them by like 0.001%.
Wow.
So our obesity crisis started in 1984, and it's gone up about 1% per year since 1984. That's the first record of it. So what we're saying is, yes, genes can play an influence, but they haven't changed that much, and how much they're being influenced. We know that stress can change your DNA at transcription level, and there are lots of things. Maybe certain foods can, maybe, but currently we would have to say our DNA has not changed that much. And put it in perspective, the average man is now 10 kilos heavier than he was in 1986. Well, the study was done between 2000 and 1986, and the average woman's about 7 kilos heavier. And the research was quite clear that the weight gain in men was a combination of moving less and eating more, and with the women it was more to do with eating more. So the genes may play a part, but our genes haven't changed that much to be the cause of the problem we have now. So, but maybe certain foods and things made you switch off certain genes, who knows?
Yeah. We often see people in the gym doing abdominal exercises to reduce the belly fat. Can we use exercise to spot reduce body fat in a particular area?
Wouldn't it be good if we could?
Of course it would be.
Yeah, it'd be good. Aesthetically and from a health perspective, it's a very appealing notion that you can just exercise. So if you've got a big belly, you exercise the belly and it'll leave there. But the research says this just doesn't work. A number of studies, they compared cycling. They got people to cycle, and they would expect if you cycle that you would lose the fat off your legs, wouldn't you? It makes sense, you're working your legs. And they didn't, they lost it off their abdomen. And they got people to do 5,000, this is weird in the study, it was over so many weeks, and it was 5,007 crunches.
Why 5,000?
Yeah, don't ask, I don't know. But interesting enough, and I think they compared that with cycling, and still the weight came off their stomach. They weren't spot reducing it. It will always come off your gut preferentially because it's what we have called lively lipolysis. It's more easily broken down. That's why it's easier for men to lose weight than women. Women will struggle more than men because men tend to carry the fat here and it's more easily disposed of. So no, you can't spot reduce. I've even done studies where they've got people to cycle with one leg and the other leg they're not using has lost as much fat and they're not even used it.
Wow.
So your body tends to take it from where it needs and it will tend to preferentially take it from the gut. But there's no research that I've seen at all, and I've done a recent research review to look for this, that spot reduction will work. It just, preferentially will take it off the gut. It can be very difficult, particularly for females, because they may not have, they might have gynoid obesity, so they're carrying their weight on the lower body, and so the little bit of fat on their upper body, they'll lose that. I've seen this happen, and it doesn't really affect the lower body too much, the weight loss. So it is difficult, but it's you can't spot reduce.
Yeah, I think we get that a lot, especially with a lot of women who would come in and say, "Oh, I want to lose back fat," or "I want to lose this bit of my leg or my part of my bum," and it's like, well, I can't really do anything about that, can I?
You can spot tone. It's interesting. You could spot tone. So if you have a poorly toned muscle, remember the definition of tone is just a few fibers always contracted, which gives a toned muscle shape. You can spot tone, but the fat that lies above it, you cannot spot reduce. Okay. And unfortunately, you can't dictate where that will come from. We cannot say that this program will tell you, your body will take it from where it chooses to take it from. And that's where genetics will come on a role because you'll have a genetic predisposition to gain fat in certain areas. So, unfortunately, it's good notion, but the research doesn't support it.
Is it true we burn more fat performing cardio first thing in the morning on an empty stomach?
Another
great topic.
Yeah, excellent question again. Interesting, because it's not a straight answer. And this, we have to look at the research for this because basically the rationale for doing cardio on an empty stomach is that overnight your body stores a carbohydrate. We store carbohydrate in your body in a substance, as a substance called glycogen. Overnight, they decrease greatly. Particularly because the brain can only use glucose for energy. So in the night, you're having all sorts of dreams and thoughts. So your brain's still going to use this glucose. So we're still having to use energy when we're asleep. So your stores of carbohydrate go down. So the idea is if you exercise when the carbs are low, this will force your body to metabolize fat for energy. And there is some evidence to support this. There was a study done in the 80s by Wilcox. And what they found is that if you exercise on an empty stomach first thing in the morning, you will metabolize a kilo of fat quicker than if you do it later in the day after you've eaten. And to be precise, they found that in terms of energy, if you exercise first thing in the morning, 67% of the energy came from fat, whereas later in the day it was only 50%. But before you set your alarm clock and think, I'm going to get up early and do some cardio, there was a recent review where they looked at about 18 papers and they found that actually, overall, in terms of, yes, you're oxidizing more fat, but in terms of fat in body weight that you lose, it doesn't make much of a difference. And there's a couple of things, because firstly, it's the 24-hour energy expenditure that's important. So, for example, in one study, they looked at people, what they burnt during the working out on an empty stomach and those that are fed. And the calorie range was 250 to 219 calories difference. There's not much in it. Yeah. And in fact, the amount of fat that someone burnt on an empty stomach was 94.3 calories. And if they exercised after they'd eaten, it was 71.6 calories. So there's not much in that. But you've got to think, resistance training, when you're doing resistance training, you're burning hardly any fat because you're mainly using, it depends on the weight and the length of the set, but they're not tend to be sort of, certainly in bodybuilding type training, not tend to be the energy supplied by the oxidative system much. Because if that were just the only criteria, then resistance training and interval training wouldn't get us lean. Because when you're doing a high intensity interval, in terms of the amount of energy you're expending, not much of that is coming from fat, but it's the overall energy expenditure. The other problem we have, if we exercise on an empty stomach, you're going to start to attack your muscle protein more because it's going to take the energy from somewhere. So the odd workout's not going to make much difference, but over the long term, this could start to actually reduce your muscle mass theoretically. So some people will take supplements like branched chain amino acids to help to offset this. I'm not sure how different. There's some science that branched chain amino acids can help. But generally, I would say if you can if you want to exercise first thing in the morning without eating, there's no problem with that. Just watch, as I say, with the muscle. If you can train after you've eaten, you can tend to train harder and longer. And remember, it's the total energy expenditure that counts. Because we're slightly taking this point off slightly, you might have heard of the fat burning zone. You heard of that? You're on CV equipment? Okay, I'll explain this. This is a big misnomer. The fat burning zone, you burn the greatest percentage of fat is supplying, so let me rephrase that. It is the greatest amount of fat in terms of a percentage of your total energy expenditure is when you're asleep. That's when you're burning most fat as a percentage of the calories. Wow. So why don't we just go to bed and sleep the fat off? Because it's the total calories that count. So if you exercise at, say, I'll give you an example, if you exercise at 50% of your maximum heart rate, someone might burn 60% fat at that rate, but they're only going to burn off 225 calories. If they increase to 80% of the heart rate for 30 minutes, they're going to burn off 360 calories. So I would say work as hard and as long as you can, because basic sort of maths, if you're working harder and longer, you're going to burn more calories, and it is the total calories that count, because if they didn't, sprinters, bodybuilders would not be lean, because most of a sprinter's training is not in a fat burning zone. So, but this doesn't mean you can't use it. If you prefer to do a low intensity, long duration training, then fine. But you'll just need to do more of it.
Yeah.
And actually women need to do more exercise as well, because they're lighter, they will expend less energy. Yeah. So if a 100 kilo person wants to burn off 500 calories on a weight bearing exercise and a 50 kilo person does, the 50 kilo person is going to have to work that much longer.
So do you think if someone was doing resistance training and having shorter rest periods, can you still get that fat loss benefit?
Yeah, with metabolic resistance training, which is basically relies on that. So what you'll do is you'll have a short recovery. So you might do, there are many different formats for this, and it has been shown to really stoke your metabolism. So what you might look at is what they call big circuits. You might do 3 or 4 big exercises. You might do a squat, a bench press, sort of chin or something like that. So all the big muscle group exercises, you have minimal recovery between, because you're using different muscle groups, and that has a really helps to stimulate that and to burn more calories. Yeah, definitely. Excellent. Because it's, and also you're creating an energy deficit where that has to be paid back. So if you produce more lactic acid, your body will use more energy to take your body back to normal. It likes to stay in a state of homeostasis, in a state of balance. Yeah. If you disrupt that with training, high intensity training, it's going to take longer for your body to rebalance itself, and so it's going to burn more energy. And that's what we call EPOC, as we said earlier, excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. So yeah, resistance training, you can do that. And certainly if you look on the site, we've got a bit about metabolic resistance training. We give you a few ideas how to do it, but it really does work very well.
For many people, the most confusing and controversial aspect of fat loss is what they should eat. Some experts tell us that we should eat a high protein, low carbohydrate diet, while others say that a high carbohydrate diet, low fat diet is the way to go. Or perhaps we should eat like our prehistoric ancestors. What is the most effective diet for fat loss?
It's a good question. It's been studied a lot. If you go onto Google and you put the word diet in, it comes up with 1,460 million hits. I don't even know how big that number is. It's over 1 billion hits. So there's a lot of diets out there. Interestingly, I spoke to once a professor of physiology and nutrition at one of the top universities, and we talked about diets, and he said we could invent a diet now and you'll lose weight on it. We'll call it the alphabet diet. So on Monday, you eat food beginning with an A, apples, avocados, whatever. Tuesday, it's B, bananas, beans. You will lose weight on it. Okay, and there is an actual kind of an algorithm you can work out if something's a fad diet or not. But it is a huge business and it is very confusing. So what we did when we were looking at this, we looked at a number of studies that compared different diets under scientific conditions. And there's a couple which I'll relate to you today. One was done, and they compared Slim Fast Plan, which is a meal replacement approach. They compared Weight Watchers Pure Points, which is an energy controlled diet. Well, they're all energy controlled actually, with a weekly group meetings. They compared the Dr. Atkins diet, which was the kind of high protein, low carbs, and a Rosemary Connolly Eat Yourself Slim diet and exercise plan. The subjects followed these diets for 8 weeks. Now, the reason they picked 8 weeks is that's how most people stick to a diet. And you've got to remember something like, I think it's something like 2 out of every 5 women are on a diet and 1 out of every 6 men at any one time. So people are trying lots of diets, and most of them last for about 8 weeks. So the length of the study was for 8 weeks. And what they found, interestingly, at the end of it, they all lost similar amounts of body fat, or each diet. So I can give you the exact figures. The Atkins people lost 5.2 kilos, the Weight Watchers 4.7, 3.7 was Slim Fast, and Rosemary Connolly's group, people lost 4 kilos. So the Atkins diet did edge it. You got 5.2 kilos of weight loss. But overall, in terms of statistical significance from a science perspective, there wasn't a massive difference. So what they're saying is, look, each of them creates an energy deficit. But what was interesting is the Atkins diet had the least reduction in energy, only 30%, where some of the others were like 37%, but it lost most body fat, which would lead you to think, well, a high protein, low carb diet is going to be more efficient or more effective. And that kind of is true. But 8 weeks is not a lifetime. So another group of researchers conducted a study over 2 years, and this is much more realistic. And what they compared were 2 diets that were high fat, 2 were average, there were 2 low fat diets, 2 high fat diets, 2 average protein diets, 2 high protein diets. They also looked at carb levels from 35 to 60% of the total dietary intake. And interestingly enough, after 6 months, most people lost an average of 6 kilos, which represented 7% of their initial body weight, which was ideal, was what we said about it, spot on. But after 2 years, most people have regained most of their weight. The people on the higher protein diet generally lost a bit more, but after 2 years, there wasn't much difference. So what the actual authors concluded, look, based on these results, the most important thing is that you have an energy deficit. And if you're, for example, a vegan, it's much harder to eat a high protein diet. Because just the natural sort of foods that you're going to select. So they're saying pick a diet that works for you based on your preferences, cultural, beliefs and things, and create the diet, but make sure you have an energy restriction, because over a couple of years, and I think this is a good lesson from this one, is people trying to stick to it. And what the research, and I've trained many people, I've seen some dramatic weight loss. I was recently speaking to a woman who lost 9 stone. And basically, you have to change your lifestyle. And it's a pattern of eating for life. And if you go on to the website and you go onto the NHS website and you look at the Eat Well guide, it gives you a good idea. And a friend of mine is a PhD nutritionist, and he was working with a PhD nutritionist who's also a natural bodybuilder. And they analysed the diets of lots of bodybuilders, and they basically ate the Eat Well plate. That was their diet. And there's a misconception that bodybuilders don't eat carbohydrate, but when they're building muscle, you need lots of carbohydrate. So I think that overall, the most important thing is you eat a healthy, sustainable diet, and it's one that will give you the energy restriction. If it is too restrictive and too strict, you will not stick to it. It's just not going to work. I've heard people do all sorts of weird diets, like the cabbage diet. You just lose your friends if you did that, I think. I know you're losing your weight. But they'll just do anything. A soup diet. All I'm going to do, I'm not going to eat now for the rest of the week. Really, that's going to work. So I think be sensible. There's lots of good quality information out there. But the more gimmicky a diet is, the more it looks at your ancestry and your blood group and things, the less kind of science there is normally to support it. Some people's bodies do function better, perhaps a slightly higher fat, some slightly different protein, whatever. But you have to remember there are great individual differences between people. There are greater differences between individuals than there are races, and people forget that. So finally, the American College of Sports Medicine put in their guidelines. Look, these are only guidelines. Some people need to do more. And some less. So find out what works for you. It's something sustainable, it's palatable, and it's healthy. And that's a really important thing. So overall, yes, the slightly higher protein, lower carb diets do seem to edge it, certainly over a short period, but over a couple of years, doesn't seem to be much difference. The thing with athletes is it really changes, because if you think about it, Mo Farah will not need as much protein per kilo of body weight as a bodybuilder. So what I think with these, we're talking about the general person, aren't we? But yeah, when it comes to sports, and that's a whole science, it's, the friend was a doctor in that field of sports nutrition. And when you look at the diets that they'll churn out for like young endurance athletes or old endurance athletes versus a boxer versus, it's much more scientific than that. But for most people, for a sustainable diet, because remember, most athletes only sustain that diet for a relatively short period. If you're a boxer, Ricky Fattens, they used to call him, didn't they? Don't recall that. But he used to put on piles of weight, but he'd have to eat much healthier for a fight. So what we're talking about is a health-related, sustainable approach to it. Because what's the point I have had recently someone that needed to lose weight for a wedding. And so, okay, you can do certain things to do that. But ideally, you're looking for a sustainable approach. And that's eating a balanced diet. And you need carbs. You need carbs to train. You need protein. You need fat. You need all those things. But yeah, certainly athletes, very different. If you look at the protein intake of a power lifter compared to an endurance, and look at the carb intake as well. When you look at the amount of, like the Tour de France cyclists, they have an intravenous, like carbs and that and stuff. They were ridiculous because they just couldn't eat enough. You're in a saddle all day working at the level that they work at. Is astonishing how many calories. The record for calorie expenditure, anyone have a guess? The most calories expended in a day through activity? Any answers on a postcard? 10,000 calories in a day. And that was Serrano Fines and Mike Stroud when they crossed the Antarctic, because they were dragging huge sledges with them, which was very heavy. They're in a freezing cold environment. So they were burning 10,000 calories a day. Couldn't eat that much. They lost a third of their body weight.
Wow.
Their HDL cholesterol, the good one, was elevated. Their LDL was about, and yet their diet had lots of saturated fat in it, because that's the only way they could get the calories in. Because a gram of fat is 9 calories. A gram of carbs is about 4. So when you're in the Arctic, you need that energy. So, but that's a unique physiological environment. You're in a freezing cold environment, working 10 hours a day, dragging huge loads. So, so your diet has to reflect your activity. Yeah, definitely. Interesting enough. Now, when you go to altitude, I had to write an essay about this. When you go to altitude, you start to drop muscle as well. We don't really know why. And there's lots of rubbish talked about altitude. Just out of interest, we've got time, just mention. Yeah. People think that the people in the Himalayas, they live to be like 150 and they're very wise people. And that's not true. If you look at the science, the life expectancy of a man in, I think it's Nepal, don't quote me on this, I don't want to publish it, it's like 50. It's like 50. And I know a chemist, pharmacist, and he went on a hike through the Himalayas. And he said all the Sherpas smoke heavily. And American people are obsessed with smoking. They said, you shouldn't smoke. It damages your health. And one of the Sherpas says, smoke, damn, it's ridiculous. My dad smoked 20 a day and he lived to 50. And he thought that was good. Because when you're at altitude, it's not that good for your body. And you do tend to lose muscle. We don't really know why. And there's all sorts of things tend to happen to your body. And that's, definitely. If I was going on an Arctic hike, I'd be down that kebab shop. I'd be into the ice cream. I would just want to pack on, because remember, that's stored energy.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, but he's got cancer, he's not doing very well, but he was really fat and he didn't look ill. And I picked up a bug and within days I looked terrible. But because he had such a store of energy, even the surgeon said, you don't look ill, you look really well. But he had cancer and it's terminal now. But his body had such a store of energy. In fact, he couldn't eat, his body was quite happy. Now here's a little factoid. The average lean person has 12% body fat, 12 to 15% body fat, has enough fat in calories to run from London to Edinburgh and back, right? 700 miles. So it's more like Liverpool and back, right? But it's the carbohydrate that would limit you, because we can only store about 20 miles at the most of carbs. Wow. But in terms of body fat, you could pretty much run from here to Scotland. Other things that fatigue you out. So we've got lots of stored energy. So if you're going to go to the Arctic or you're going on one of these treks, pork up. Because you're not recording that, are you? I thought, are you? No, you can't put that. You can't. You've got to cut that. You can't have pork up.
In layman's terms, pork up.
Yeah, so that's what athletes go and train. You should never, by the way, I don't record this bit, but don't train at altitude. If you're going to do that, sleep at altitude, train at sea level, unless you're going to compete at altitude. If you're at boxers, they used to get it wrong. So what boxers do, they train at altitude, but your skill breaks down and you can't train as hard.
Crazy.
So the clever people, what they do is they sleep at altitude, don't even have to go, they get an oxygen tent, reduce the oxygen content. That forces your body to produce more red blood cells, and then you train at sea level. But if you're going to compete at altitude, you've got two options. You either acclimatise or you fly in, do the event and go. Because if you get it wrong, you really suffer.
Many people find losing weight difficult and look for ways to make it easier, causing them to turn to appetite suppressants and other medications to help. But like all medications, those used for weight loss have some unpleasant and potentially dangerous side effects. So, are there any supplements that have been shown scientifically to help reduce body fat without any unpleasant side effects?
Yeah, yes, there are. The short answer to that question is yes. I mean, there are medications out there, as you rightly point out, but they can have some very nasty side effects, including, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Some are even like diet pills are addictive. So they're not a healthy option at all. But people always want to take short. if you have a medical problem and the doctors prescribe something like Orlistat, which helps to stop the absorption of fat, that's one thing, but that also has some very nasty side effects. So yes, there are things out there, quite a number actually. There is no magic bullet. There's nothing you're going to take that's going to turn you overnight, make you 5 kilos lighter. But there are a few. We'll start with the first one, which is whey protein. We tend to think of it for building muscle, and it is excellent. It is an excellent supplement, and there's lots of good science behind whey protein, lots and lots of good science. And on the new site, you'll be able to click on and see the science which supports our whey protein. So whey protein, not only does it help us to build muscle, but very importantly, it helps us to reduce body fat. And I'm going to cite a study in a second on that. And also, very, very importantly, it helps to maintain muscle whilst we're dieting. Yeah. And that's very important. Now, a study on whey protein, they got people who are on a 500 calorie a day deficit diet. One group took whey protein and another group took a placebo. And those that took the whey protein, they lost more body fat and preserved more muscle. So whey protein is definitely a goer. Now you have to be careful because not all whey proteins are created equally. Okay, with Timefall's whey protein, we're very careful about what we put into it. First of all, it's a time release formula. So what that means is you're getting throughout the day a release of those, the nutrients that you need, and particularly when you're asleep, so that's going to help. Also, the way it's processed means that we keep the important growth factors. And also, this might sound a bit sort of silly, but it's the flavours. We spent a lot of time and money getting the flavours right with an Italian flavour house. It does ice cream because people do not want to drink something they don't like the taste of. I was given some soy and pea protein that I was too mean not to drink. It was disgusting. I would never buy it again, but it was like drinking ditch water. So, as I was saying, taste is very important. So we've spent a lot of time and money getting the taste right. Also, we've added probiotics to help with digestion. So as I say, be very careful. As I said, not all whey proteins are created equally. So have a look at what you're getting. And as I say, if you go onto our site, you can see exactly what's in the whey protein, but definitely it's very good. And if you have a limited budget and you're trying to build muscle and lose a bit of body fat, I would definitely recommend whey protein. There's lots of science for it. So that's a good one. Other ones that we have, glucose disposal agents. These are getting kind of more processed. These are basically substances that increase our muscle sensitivity to insulin, and so we can uptake carbohydrate more easily. So it's more likely to be used to supply energy for activity rather than be stored as fat. A lot of people that are overweight, they develop type 2 diabetes, their body may produce enough insulin, but they're not sensitive to it. So this is a real problem. So these glucose disposal agents can help us, dispose the glucose. Now, the key ingredients of Timefall's glucose disposal agent have been scientifically proven to give some very good health and performance benefits. For example, a study by Hugh et al. Found that berberine helped obese people to lose weight with no adverse side effects. Yes. And all the research that we quote on our site in any articles we publish are all from scientific journals. So you're welcome to go along and look at them. It's all evidence-based, and that is very important. That any claim we make, there will be evidence to back it up. Another effective supplement is a testosterone support supplement. Basically, these are a collection of substances which combine to help to increase or support our body's natural production of testosterone. So although it is an androgen, women also have testosterone, about 10% that of a man. It's very important for lots of things, sort of health-related things, not just maintaining muscle mass and helping us to build muscle mass, but also helping to keep a healthy body composition, so basically keep our fat levels down. So the key ingredients of Timefall's testosterone support supplement have been scientifically shown to provide a number of health and performance benefits, including increasing muscle mass. For example, a study investigating the effects of 8 weeks of supplementation with a herb called ashwagandha in healthy young men engaged in resistance training found that actually they increase muscle mass and strength and reduce body fat in comparison to a placebo. And a similar study looked at fenugreek, which provided significant improvements in strength and a reduction in body fat in comparison to a placebo. And again, neither of these studies had any adverse side effects. So yeah, that's another one. So think about testosterone. As we get older, we tend to lose testosterone as men, and that's one of the reasons we tend to gain more body fat and lose muscle. If you look at the ingredients in the time for testosterone, they're at the right levels as well. People tend to forget that. They look at the front of a label of a product and they go, oh, it's whey protein, it's whatever. Turn the label around. Are you getting it at the right levels? And that's very important. Some of the cheaper products have lots of fillers, so you're not actually getting so much bang for your buck. More recently, some research on branched chain amino acids was done in China, and they found that people that had high levels of branched chain amino acids in their body tended to lose weight easier and tended not to get obese. So, branched chain amino acids, that's another supplement that has evidence to support it for the fat loss thing. Conjugated linoleic acid is another supplement. I mean, basically, this is a group of chemicals that are found in the fatty acid linoleic acid, which occurs naturally. Again, it's a natural thing. It occurs in red meat and dairy products. And research has shown that its consumption gives us lots of health benefits, including reduction of body fat. One study which analysed various studies, so it was a review, found that in 18 studies, they examined 18 studies and found that conjugated linoleic acid actually helped reduce body fat and without, again, any side effects. That's another one that helps. Thermogenic supplements. Okay, as we mentioned earlier on, we're really inefficient. So when we give off energy, we give off heat. So the term thermogenic relates to heat producing. So basically, a thermogenic supplement is substances which together work to increase our metabolism. And interestingly, there was a study by Campbell et al. That showed that a single dose of a thermogenic supplement led to a significant elevations in resting metabolic rate. And remember, we elevate that metabolic rate when we're sat on the sofa, we're nibbling away at our fat stores. So that's the best way of doing it. Interestingly, our supplement uses lots of natural ingredients, and there is very good research to support the use. For example, caffeine. Caffeine is lots of supplements. What it will do, it helps to stimulate fat cells to release the fatty acids into the bloodstream so we can use them as energy, but it also helps to reduce our appetite and boost our metabolism. So we're more likely to want to exercise, and it suppresses our appetite. So there's 3 ways it's helping us to reduce our body fat. So it's releasing the fatty acids, reducing our appetite, and, as I say, boosting metabolism to help us burn more energy. So all those supplements have got science to. So as I said, there is no magic bullet, but it is the small increments here and there. If you think about, if you just lost 100 calories a day from something over a year, that's going to be a lot. What's that? That's what I can't think. 365 days in a year. Work it out. That's a lot. So what we have to look at over time. We've focused here so far on fat, but remember, a lot of people at Time 4 we deal with are athletes and bodybuilders. Yeah. So again, it comes down to weight. And so a lot of people do to make weight, and what bodybuilders to get a little bit leaner or to get more defined is to get rid of excess water. And they use that by things people call water tablets, but basically the technical term is a diuretic. So they help your body to excrete excess water. Now, there are all sorts of prescription drugs which are used for this, for congestive heart failure, high blood pressure, etc. But these are prescription only, and they do have side effects. However, the natural ingredients that we use in the Time 4, the diuretic, actually have been shown to be as effective in some studies. For example, one of the ingredients, which is called horsetail, has a long Latin name that I won't pronounce, was as effective as a diuretic medication, a prescription one, without causing any significant changes in electrolytes. And that's what you have to be careful with. Old diuretics would get your body to eliminate potassium, and your body works on a potassium and sodium balance. And if you mess those up, it can be potentially fatal. So, it's very important that your body's electrolytes are kept in balance. So, say the ingredient which we use, one of the key ingredients in our product, horsetail, as effective as a prescription diuretic without the side effects. So yeah, all of those things happen. But do remember the water tablets are really just if you're making weight or a bodybuilder trying to look a little bit leaner. Because at the end of the day, the thing we have to consider is not to be hung up on the numbers. I would say to clients, if I told you you had 30% body fat, but you looked great and you felt great, how would you feel? Well, it wouldn't bother me. So really you have to judge it by how you feel, what's a healthy weight for you. And I think one of the problems we have now is the media represent images where we have these images thrust upon us of ridiculously lean people that can't live like that. They get in shape for a show. They get in shape for a film. And also, there's lots of manipulation of images done nowadays. 100%. And what I would say to anyone, if you're feeling a bit bad about your body, look at what stars look like when they're not in a film. So if you look at a film like 300, all these, Trojan warriors, a year later, they didn't look in very good shape at all. So look for a realistic level of body composition. So what you can say, and a good guide really is, if you're trying to lose weight, what have you been able to sustain for a year healthily before? If you managed to sustain a certain weight, as long as it wasn't when you're a baby and you're an adult, you're not going to sustain 9 pounds when you're 36 years old. But basically, that's what you need to find a healthy level for you. And I'm fortunate to say we are bombarded by images of people that are often ridiculously lean, and they're often doctored. And in fact, there have been campaigns now for males. I think Dove Beauty showed a picture of a male model and showed how they doctored the image to make him look more defined. Oh, wow. And you can find that on YouTube. So I think as, we're in the business of health predominantly, and we have to advise people on good health, and it's having the right level of body fat for you. And that will vary, but the important thing is to be healthy. So, yeah.